Evan found the letter while cleaning out a drawer he hadn't opened in years. It was folded neatly, once, then again. The edges softened by time. His own handwriting stared back at him. Careful, deliberate, the kind he used when he didn't want to make a mistake. He didn't remember writing it, but as he held it, he remembered the feeling. The letter had been written on a quiet afternoon long ago, when the world felt paused. Evan had been younger then, full of thoughts he didn't yet know how to carry. Writing had seemed easier than speaking. Paper didn't interrupt. Paper didn't misunderstand. He unfolded the page. The first line was simple. I don't know if I'll ever give this to you. Evan smiled faintly. That sounded like him. The letter went on, not with grand confessions or dramatic promises, but with observations. Small things. How silence felt heavier some days than others. How he had learned to enjoy mornings more than nights. How there were moments he wished he could rewind. Not to change anything, but to sit in them a little longer. There was no name written anywhere on the page. That had been intentional. At the time, Evan hadn't known who the letter was for. He only knew it was meant for someone important. Someone who might one day exist. Or someone who already did, but didn't yet feel reachable. He read slowly, letting each sentence settle. I think people carry more than they show, the letter said. And sometimes they get tired of holding it alone. Evan exhaled quietly. He remembered that thought. It had come to him while watching strangers pass by, each absorbed in their own lives. He had wondered how many stories crossed paths without ever colliding. The letter didn't ask for anything. It didn't demand understanding. It simply explained. As he reached the end, the final lines stood out the most. If this letter stays here forever, that's okay. Writing it was enough. Evan folded the page again and sat back. He thought about all the moments since then. The conversations he never had. The ones he did. the choices that quietly shaped his days. He thought about how much of life happened internally, unseen, unshared. The letter had never been sent, but it hadn't been wasted. It had captured a version of him that no longer existed, preserved in ink. A reminder that even unanswered thoughts had value. That expressing something, even privately, could lighten the weight of it. Evan placed the letter back into the drawer. Not because he wanted to forget it, but because he knew where it was now. Some things didn't need an audience. They just needed a place to rest. He closed the drawer gently and continued cleaning, feeling oddly lighter, as if the letter had done its job, even after all these years. Every night, at exactly 9 o'clock, a small light turned on in the window of the house at the end of Cedar Street. No one remembered when it first started. Some people said it had always been there. Others said it appeared one winter and never went away. But everyone noticed it, because the house itself was old, quiet, and usually dark. The light was warm and yellow. It did not flicker. It did not change. It simply stayed on, night after night. Emma noticed it during her evening walks home from work. Cedar Street was a shortcut she had taken for years. But lately, she found herself slowing down when she reached the end of the road. The light felt comforting somehow, like a promise that something steady still existed in the world. Emma lived alone in a small apartment nearby. Her days were busy, but predictable. Work, errands, dinner, sleep. Nothing was wrong, exactly. But nothing felt especially right either. Life felt like it was moving forward without asking her opinion. One evening, as she passed the house, she noticed something new. The front door was open. She stopped walking. The house looked the same as always. Tall, narrow, with peeling paint and overgrown plants. But the open door felt strange. The light in the window was still on, glowing softly. Emma hesitated. She told herself it was none of her business. Old houses had drafts. Doors opened. Things happened. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was waiting. She took a step closer. "Hello?" she called. Her voice quieter than she expected. No answer. Emma stood there for a long moment, listening. The street was empty. No cars, no voices, only the distant sound of wind moving through the trees. Finally, she stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and old paper. The entryway was narrow but clean. There were no broken floorboards, no signs of damage. It felt cared for. The light she had seen from outside came from a small lamp on a wooden table in the next room. Emma followed it. The room was simple. A chair, a table, shelves filled with notebooks. Hundreds of them. Each one carefully labeled with dates. Emma ran her fingers along the spines. The earliest date was decades old. "What is this place?" she whispered. "You could call it a record." The voice came from behind her. Emma turned quickly, her heart racing. An older man stood near the doorway. He had kind eyes and silver hair, and he smiled as if she were expected. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "I didn't mean to. Your door was open." "I know," the man said gently. "It was meant to be." Emma frowned. "Meant to be?" He nodded. "You've been noticing the light for a while now." She felt a small chill. "Yes. That's usually how it starts." He gestured toward the chair. "Please, sit." Emma didn't know why she listened, but she did. The chair was solid and comfortable. The man picked up one of the notebooks. "These are moments," he said. "Small ones. Ordinary ones. The kind people forget." Emma looked at him. "Why keep them?" "Because they matter," he replied. "Even when no one else thinks they do." He opened a notebook and read aloud. March 12th. A woman laughed unexpectedly while waiting for her coffee. She surprised herself. Emma's breath caught. That had been her, years ago. She stared at him. "How do you know that?" The man smiled softly. This house watches, not in a way that judges, only in a way that remembers. Emma felt her chest tighten. Why? Because people forget themselves, he said. They forget who they were and who they still are. He closed the notebook. The light, Emma said slowly. What is it? It's a signal, he replied, for those who feel a little lost. It says something is still here. Emma swallowed. Why me? The man considered her for a moment. Because you've been walking past your own life instead of stepping into it. The words landed gently but firmly. Emma looked down at her hands. I don't know how to change that. You don't have to change everything, he said. Only notice. He handed her a notebook, a blank one. This one is yours, he said. Emma took it. The cover was plain. What do I do with it? Write what matters, he said, even if it feels small. She nodded slowly. When Emma looked up again, the man was gone. The room was quiet. She stood, notebook in hand, and walked back toward the door. Before leaving, she turned off the lamp. The house went dark. The next night, Emma turned on the light in her own window. The notebook had been sitting on the desk for months. Marcus had bought it on impulse. The cover was plain. The pages thick and unmarked. At the time, he had imagined filling it with ideas, plans, or something important. Instead, it stayed close. This morning, he noticed it again. The room was quiet, except for the sound of distant traffic. Marcus sat down and placed the notebook in front of him. He opened it carefully, as if the pages might already contain something fragile. They were empty. He stared at the first page longer than necessary. The blank space felt larger than it should have been. It made him aware of how often he waited. Waited to feel ready. Waited to know what to write. Waited for the right moment. Marcus picked up a pen. He didn't try to create anything meaningful. He wrote the date, Then he wrote a single sentence about the way the morning felt. Nothing more. The pen moved slowly, but it moved. After that, he closed the notebook and stood up. The action felt small, but it changed the tone of the room. The desk no longer felt like a place of delay. Marcus stepped outside. The air was cooler than he expected. A few clouds moved lazily across the sky. People passed without noticing him, each carrying their own thoughts, their own unseen lists of concerns. He walked without purpose, letting his thoughts stay unfinished. At a corner he rarely took, Marcus stopped. The street ahead was unfamiliar, yet calm. He turned onto it without thinking. The walk didn't lead to anything special. There was no discovery waiting at the end. But when Marcus eventually returned home, he felt different. Not inspired. Not motivated. Just slightly more present. Back at the desk, Marcus opened the notebook again. He added one more sentence. Then he closed it. That was enough for today. The notebook remained mostly empty, but it was no longer untouched. At the edge of a small town, where the houses slowly gave way to open fields, there lived a bird named Ellen. She was not a large bird, and she was not colorful in any way that made people stop and point. Her feathers were soft shades of brown and gray, the colors of earth and clouds before rain. Because of this, Ellen was often overlooked. But Ellen noticed everything. Each morning, she woke before the sun. She felt the cool air resting gently on her feathers and listened to the quiet sounds of the world preparing itself for the day. Far away, a dog might bark once. Somewhere close, leaves whispered as they moved in the breeze. Ellen liked this time best, when the world felt honest and unhurried. Ellen lived in a tall tree that had watched many seasons pass. Its branches were strong but kind, bending just enough to protect her from harsh winds. From her place near the top, Ellen could see far across the fields. She saw people walking, cars passing, and other birds flying with confidence and speed. Ellen could fly, of course. She had learned like all birds do. But she flew carefully, never too high and never too far. The open sky made her uneasy. It felt too wide, too full of unknown paths. So she stayed close to familiar places, returning again and again to the same branches, the same views, the same gentle routines. One morning, as the sun began to paint the sky with pale gold, Ellen noticed a bird she had never seen before. This bird flew higher than any Ellen had watched. Its wings moved with ease, and it seemed to trust the air completely. It circled once, twice, and then rested briefly on a nearby wire. Ellen studied the bird in silence. "You fly very high," Ellen finally said. The bird turned its head and looked at her. "I do," it repeated calmly. "Isn't it frightening?" Ellen asked. "Being so far from the ground?" The bird made a soft sound that might have been a laugh. "At first, yes, but the sky becomes familiar if you spend enough time with it." With that, the bird lifted off again and disappeared into the brightening morning. Ellen could not stop thinking about those words. The sky becomes familiar. The day passed as usual. Ellen flew short distances, found food, rested, and watched the world move below her. But something inside her felt different, like a small door had opened and refused to close. That evening, as the light faded and the air cooled, Ellen stood on her branch and looked upward. The sky was no longer bright and endless. It was deep and calm, filled with slow-moving clouds and the first quiet stars. She spread her wings, then folded them again. "Not today," she whispered to herself. Days passed. The strange bird did not return. But its words stayed with Ellen. She began to fly a little higher each day. Not much, just enough to feel the air change. Just enough to notice how the world below became smaller and quieter. She learned new things as she did this. She learned that the wind had different voices depending on how high you listened. She learned that fear did not disappear all at once, but thinned slowly like mist in the morning light. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered quickly. The wind grew sharp, and rain began to fall without warning. Ellen flew toward her tree, but a strong gust pushed her off course. For the first time, she was forced higher than she had ever planned to go. Her heart raced. The ground seemed far away, and the rain blurred everything she knew. But then something unexpected happened. Up there, above the rushing wind near the ground, the air was steadier. The rain softened. Ellen realized that by flying higher, she had found calm instead of chaos. She adjusted her wings and let the air carry her. When the storm passed, Ellen found herself gliding smoothly, her fear replaced by a quiet focus. She felt present in a way she had never felt before. The sky was no longer an empty space. It was a place with layers, moods, and kindness she had never discovered from below. When she returned to her tree, everything looked the same. But she was not. From that day on, Ellen flew higher. Not always, and not without care, but with trust. She explored the sky the way she once studied the fields. She learned when to rise and when to return. She learned that courage did not mean leaving everything behind, but allowing yourself to grow beyond what once felt safe. Sometimes, as she rested in the early morning light, Ellen thought she saw a familiar bird flying far above. And though they never spoke again, she felt grateful. Because the sky, once so distant and frightening, had become a place she understood. And Ellen, the small, quiet bird, had learned that even the widest spaces can feel like home when you give yourself time to know them.